everyone. Welcome to Meet the Healers. I'm Lori Crine, and today I'm super excited to have Juan Carlos Portillo. Is that how you say your last name?
Portillo.
Portillo, okay, on the show. And Juan Carlos, his business is called Portillo chiropractic.com is the website. And he's located in Willow Glen, California, in San Jose. And so today we're going to take a deep dive into his practice and his theory behind what he does. So welcome. It's good to see you.
It's good to be here.
Great. So I read on your website your story about how you started in getting into chiropractic. You started in the medical field. You were going to be a doctor, and you got kind of disillusioned. So can you share a little bit more about that whole path?
I went to a local high school in Palo Alto. Palo Alto's right next to Stanford University. So a lot of my classmates had parents that worked at Stanford. And during the summer, my senior year, I got to internship with a pulmonary specialist, Dr. Theodore from Penn State. Or actually, he went to Penn State. Basically, he was a football player, ex-football player, and I was a jock at that point playing football. So it was a great affinity with him. But he smoked and drank coffee. And this is the time when he would do rounds. He would be having a cigarette in his mouth with one hand and then coffee in the other. And then they had these, when he walked into the cancer area where they had all the lung people that are having surgery, he would stop outside. They had these double doors, swinging double doors. He would put his coffee down, put his cigarette down, put them down, and then walk into the ward. And then you walk in there and you'd have, this is the time when they were doing really invasive surgery. And people had lost parts of their faces and their mouths, and they'd have holes in their throats. And he would go through his process of explaining what's going on, post-surgery, what was going on. Then you get to the other side, there'd be another double doors, and then he'd light up and grab another cup of coffee. And I was a young person at that point, very impressionable. I really liked him a lot. He was very, very friendly towards me. He took me under his wing. But it just created a conflict within my own psyche. You know, when you're young, you have this idealistic perspective on life. And I knew that wasn't healthy. And it made no sense to me. And watching the effects of cancer, lung cancer on people, it was pretty dramatic. I mean, people are losing part of their bodies. Some of them actually will stick the cigarette in the hole in their throat and smoke. And it made quite an impression on me. And it just basically confused me because I wanted to be a doctor. This is the American dream, being a doctor. So it just disillusioned me in the process. When I went to UC Davis my freshman year in college, in Davis, they had these basement labs, and you spend basically 6 hours a day in the lab twice a week. And it's very, I used to think, and you're doing very mundane, studies about certain chemicals, not my field, not what I wanted to do. So I started reevaluating, do I really want to do this? And that's when I started to change my perspective on medicine in regards to healing, because at that point in my life, I didn't see medicine as really jiving with my philosophy on health. I was a jock. I knew how it felt to run, to eat, to just be healthy. And in surgical procedures and medicine, drugs wasn't something that I said, that's not, because that was the answer then, we can improve upon it with medicine and surgery. So it changed my perspective, and I started to question my lifelong goal. It was difficult because emotionally it was very difficult to let go of that dream, because you're attached to it and you're young. I'm 20, and it was difficult. So my older brother, who I had lost contact with, he came back into my life, and he was studying to be a chiropractor. And I just abused him up and down. I mean, I was just, because I was in the model. Chiropractors are quacks. You guys don't know what you're doing. And he was awesome because he was my older brother, so I respected him. But he said, when you're ready to listen, we can talk about it. Obviously, you're not ready to listen, so let's not talk about it, because it's it'll get angry here. He was older than me. He's 5 years older than me. So I respected him. Say, okay, I'm sorry, but I made up my mind. There's no way in heaven. This is ridiculous. And then 5 years later, was it 5 years later or something like that? He moved back into the area, and then we started hanging out together, playing racquetball and playing sports. We're both athletic. And then I was more amicable at that point. I had basically dropped away from school. I had stopped going to school, and I wasn't, you know, I had it in my mind to go back to school, but life gets in the way. I got married, had kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came back into my life, and I said, you know, he's okay, tell me about chiropractic. Tell me, you know, and then he actually started working on me. And to experience it, as well as the philosophy of because chiropractic is a vitalistic belief system, meaning that the body's self-regenerating, self-healing. And that I knew that. It has certain laws that we take care of our body, what we eat, what we breathe, the people you hang out with, you know, the environmental, emotional that you have, how that affects our bodies. So it just basically started ringing more true. And it had time had passed where I had lost a lot of my prejudice from medicine and observing how to be healthy. Because I was a sugar addict, and that was a challenge for me because, you know, in American diet, sugar is everywhere, and it's perpetuated by all kinds of mechanisms. But anyway, I had a lot of issues with sugar, and I was always trying to break that habit. And he explained to me the functions of you know, carbs, protein, and fat. And it just gave me some perspective. So I changed, and I started to actually experiment with how it actually affected me personally. And then I said, okay, I'm going to be a chiropractor because that's something that fits what I want to do. I want to be a doctor. I'm an athlete. I know how the body works. And you know, so that's why I shifted and I went to school.
That's
so when my third kid was born in 1983. Was born on Tuesday, and I started school on Thursday, and that's what happened.
Wow, that's such a great story. I mean, to me, it's such a perfect example of how our system is screwed up in the United States, especially because we get. I'm thinking about writing a book about this called America the Beautiful, and the Beautiful's crossed out, and it's America the Brainwashed.
Yeah.
Because we're brainwashed with advertising, all the things that they tell us we should eat at the store. We go in all the processed foods, right? And that's just creating illness and sickness. And then we get, you know, older, and then we get sick, and then we want the medical system to cure us, when in fact, all these foods that we've been eating cause most of the problems that we have. It could have been prevented very easily. And of course, it feels to me like they're in cahoots, right? The food companies in with the pharmaceutical companies. It's like, let's get them really sick, and then we have to give them pills to cure them. And
yeah, I mean, you know, if you look at it from now, in this point, I've been a chiropractor for 30 plus years. You take any metrics, and the latest one, you know, the United States ranks as far as they take all the top 20 industrialized countries by health, and they have metrics of health, measuring health. We, the United States, spend more money than the top 20 countries put together on health. And yet, what do we get in return for our dollar? We rank 32nd in health on the metrics of health. And they look at, you know, blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, birth rates, childhood illnesses, childhood deaths. I mean, there's a whole metric spectrum. We rank 32nd. And yet we spend the most of the top, you know, more than top 20 countries put together. And it always cracks me up when I hear about America's the greatest medical system in the world. And I go like, what metric are you looking at? You know, because it's not what I'm looking at.
Right.
And, you know, this is kind of a confused, very mixed up society in regards to health, because healthcare is personal responsibility is a big part of being healthy. And this is something the United States propaganda machine takes away from people, because, you know, we'll fix it and you're not responsible. Biggest challenge I have in my practice is you're responsible for your health. I will assist you, I will coach you, but you're responsible. And they want to give it to me. Here, doc, fix me all the time. They fix me. And when I was young, I was dumb enough to take that responsibility on. That was foolish, because I had all kinds of issues, difficulties, and challenges. But now I go, no, don't do that. I mean, right at the beginning, I said, no, you're responsible. And a lot of people don't like that. They want you to be responsible for their health. And that's a big challenge, because if you're not responsible, how are you going to get healthy? It's not going to happen, you know, because there's two things that the body has to deal with on a regular basis: gravity, and what are you feeding yourself every day? And typical American will eat between 26 to 32 same foods over and over and over again. So I always, because I'm a nutritionist now, I that's my specialty, and I'll tell you about how I get there. But I always say, okay, now are you eating into your genetic strength? Are you eating into your genetic weakness? And if you have symptoms, if you have illness, it's clearly the answer. And I cannot make you change your diet. You have to change your diet. I will give you suggestions, but you're responsible. And that's the biggest challenge, Lori, because people, eating is more than just giving nutrition to your body. There's all kinds of emotional, psychosocial issues there that are more challenging.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you. And I think that's why it's so hard for people to delineate between feeding ourselves for the nutrition part of it versus the emotional part of it.
Exactly. I always ask people, what are you hungry when you eat? Please start noticing, are you hungry? Because if you're not hungry, then there's other issues going on here. We need to look at that,
Yeah, exactly. Because that's where it's either food, or it's a cigarette, or it's a glass of wine, or we have all kinds of things that we do to move away from whatever emotional feeling that we're having that we don't want to address.
Yeah. So
Food
I don't feel whatever I'm feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like remember the Atkins diet, how popular that was? And now we have the keto diet and all these diets. And diets are not going to do it. They're not going to do it. It's about eating healthy foods and having a healthy lifestyle.
So there's certain foods that we should not eat, and there's certain foods that we should eat. How do we know? Like you said for specific individuals, everybody's got a different foods that they should be eating for their own bodies, right?
Exactly. And that's the challenge right there, because see, nutrition, whether it's medical nutrition, or so-called vitamins, this is the vitamin industry. They always put this bell curve on people, and each human being is an individual biochemical system, and you have to look at that individual individually, because you're not going to give this person, I could take potassium, magnesium, whatever, and my body will process it differently than you. So how do we discern what your body needs and what it's getting too much of?
Yeah, that's the question right there.
That's the question. So I came across this work, and this is something that's been done back in the 20s. Dr. Edwin Howe came up with this work. Basically, at that point, they call sanatoriums, and you would go to the sanatoriums. It basically where they're just like what we have today. We go to a weekend at Aslan where they cook for you, and they have your whole week planned out with exercise, massage, and mindfulness mechanisms. So they call them sanatoriums. And then he would work at a hospital and look at the illnesses, because they had a lot of infectious cardiovascular disease and diabetes back then. And he would go to these sanatoriums, and people would get better there, and they wouldn't get better in the hospital. And he goes, what are they doing differently? The same population is being exposed to this treatment, and then this treatment seems to be helping. Well, then he looked at the places that people were getting better, and they were controlling the food intake, and they were giving them whole, fresh foods. They weren't giving them canned foods. They weren't giving them, processed foods. So what's in whole, fresh foods that's not in processed foods? And back then it was the canned foods. And so in order to can something, you have to heat it up, and you put chemicals in it to preserve it. So then he looked at the issue of enzymes. So every food has enzymes within the food itself that actually, when you chew it up, helps you digest that food entity, so the body actually gets it, assimilates it, utilizes it, and eliminates it. So it actually helps the body when you have that natural enzyme within the food itself. We have enzymes naturally in our pancreas that helps break down protein, carb, and fat, but it was never designed to all the food that we're eating to be processed that way, because it was designed, if you eat a fresh fruit or vegetable and you chew it up, and again, key is to chew it up, slow down, chew it up a little bit, that releases those enzymes, so it breaks down that food so your body can utilize it. And the nutritional impact is much more effective than eating something that's not whole, fresh. So we did this back in the 20s. So then he started realizing they got better because they were getting fresh fruits and vegetables. And then they developed a 24-hour UA, because your urine is a window into your biochemistry. So when you get a UA, typically in a medical doctor, they're looking for pathology. So they're screening whether you have blood, nitrites, protein in the urine. You're not supposed to have any of that. So that's what they're looking at. This is a functional UA. So you're discerning how your body is doing over a 24-hour period, because you have a 24-hour sample, not just a small sample. And you're analyzing how is that body taking that food, processing that food, and how's the kidney function at the end there, because how you're clearing it out. And through that process, we can discern how that body is doing with that day that UA was done. So we can see where the body is, doing well, and where the body is waving the white flag, and where it's waving it really vigorously. And the big issue that I see clinically is a lot of stomach issues, a lot of heartburn. And heartburn is not a too much acid or too little acid nonsense. That's just marketing by the propaganda machine. What we're talking about is mucus. They don't produce healthy mucus, because mucus lines all your mouth, your nose, your ears, all your tube systems, which are your lungs and your digestive system. Because mucus protects the lining that is around the tube, and that lining is protein. So when you eat, and you eat basically protein food, protein is digested in an acid medium. So your body has to get down to a lower pH. And if that mucus lining is not properly barrier between the food content and the lining itself, then you're going to irritate that lining, and you're going to start having heartburn, and eventually you could have an ulcer. Okay. But again, it's a mucus production because of the improper diet that's going on there. So it's not too much acid nonsense. That's anybody usually doesn't know what they're talking about, because you're talking about basically healthy mucus. And that's a major issue. And it's the interesting thing about this COVID-19 thing is that that's how the virus gets into the lungs. When that lung, you've done the mouth, the air passages, that mucous membrane is not properly functioning, that virus can get in quicker. So they're finding out that people that have compromised mucous lining of the airways are more susceptible for COVID-19 infection. So again, it's just how that plays out. But it goes back to specifically, we're testing each body gets to be tested. Okay, how are you doing with your diet? And then we need to make, we have to make modifications with their diet, which is the biggest challenge, because people don't want to change what they eat. But when they start feeling better, then things start shifting.
So when you do that urine test, the 24-hour, whatever the person eats that day impact the results of the test? And
yeah.
So do you have a protocol? Do you what if you that day you just ate super badly, or you ate better than you usually do? Then are the tests not going to be valid? Like, how do you control for that part of it?
Good question, because basically people eat really well during that day because they know they're being checked. So there's a three process part of this analysis. Okay, so you're going to come in fasting on the day that I'm going to examine you physically. So you come in with at least a 10-hour fast. So then I'm going to physically examine your body, and there's reflex points that I'm looking for that affect to the how your body's doing with absorbing protein, carb, and fat. And then I'm going to feed you a powdered protein meal. It has actually protein, carb, and fat. So we're going to test your capacity to digest this powdered meal that I'm going to feed you. And I'm going to wait 45 minutes, and I'm going to do the same exact exam that I did when you were fasting. And I'm going to compare how you did with that. You should have easily digested this powdered meal, because it's basically a plant-based protein, carb, and fat meal. And then I'm going to correlate what I find on the physical exam with what I found on the UA. And I'm going to put more emphasis on the physical exam, because that's telling me right here and now what's going on. The UA is giving me that window when that test was done. So I correlate that together, and then I get a really good picture of what that person is having trouble with.
So that's like kind of the first entry point, I guess.
Right.
How do you go from there to, here are the foods that you should be eating for this individual? We
have these diets that we have discerned over the years, and it constantly adjusts depending on, because there's Dr. Loomis, who's my mentor. He's in Madison, Wisconsin, and people from the West, we don't eat like you guys eat over here, so we need to have a California diet. So we have a diet guide. This is a guide because we have them divided up by acceptable and poor choices, because the good foods are in both categories, but depending on where your challenge is, that food is acceptable or poor. And I always tell people this: you're going to have symptoms within 10 to 15 minutes after you ate. And if your body is having a challenge with it, you're going to have symptoms. Okay. So gas, indigestion, heartburn, cramping is a clear sign that you're having stress with whatever you just ate. So start paying attention, please. You don't want to keep eating those foods that are causing stress. So that's one aspect of it. And then I monitor them by those reflex points, because those, believe me, they hurt. And when I palpate, they get a clear signal, oops, and they know when they're straying. They know when they keep eating the same foods, even though that clearly the UA, the exam says you need to ease off on those foods. And that's the biggest challenge, because people are really strongly addicted. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but they really like certain foods and they don't want to give them up.
Yeah.
And again, I always tell people, when you start feeling better, that's going to be the challenge. At some point, you're going to say, okay, every once in a while, I'm going to eat this food because I love it, but I know that I can't eat it consistently. And that's what happens. But it's always their choice, because they know they'll have the symptoms when they eat it, and okay, I don't need to eat it every day, but I can eat it every once in a while. Well, I have the same with Rocky Road ice cream. I love it. But my body says, you know what? You need to be very moderate with that, and you have to have a small portion, because if you don't, you're going to have, I have symptoms. And there's some days where I can say, okay, I'll have a little bit. And some days I go, I want more, and I'll pay for it. And I go, okay, it's worth it. I'll go for that symptoms. But it always keeps me in balance, because I know, and it keeps me moderate.
As far as the dietary stuff, I hear what you're saying, that when you eat something, your body typically will have a reaction to it. You'll feel it. Mm-hmm. My biggest issue is I have inflammation in my joints. And so that's caused me a lot of issues. And over the years, I've tried various things to try to mitigate that. And so what I've noticed is sometimes it's a cumulative effect. So I might eat, I don't know, let's say coffee is an example. I'll have a cup of coffee, I'll be fine. And then the next day I'll have a cup of coffee. And then 5 days later, I'm like, oh, my hips are killing me. And I'm like, maybe it's the coffee. I don't know. Let me stop drinking it. So my point is that, are there cases when it's kind of builds up over time? Is that also sometimes the case?
Well, you bring up a different process here, because from what you're telling me, I would look at your lymphatic system, because basically you have lymphatic accumulation points. The lymphatic system is basically your body's way of clearing metabolic waste. And it sounds like you have accumulated, there's 4 accumulation points that we need to check, because that's a high priority that keeps the body from processing and healing. So I would say that's what I would do with you. Is when you tell me that, I would say, okay, let's see how your body's is built up accumulations where it's basically all filled up, and inflammation, anything can throw it off. Then we need specifically to mechanically, there's actually a physical technique to drain that. Then I would ask you, there's a certain stretches that I have you do, lymphatic drainage movements, and then I would give you a specific formulation that we have that would helps your body clear stuff through your breathing, through your skin, and physically movement.
Interesting. Okay, so there are some cases when it is a different approach that needs to be taken.
Yeah, because your body just doesn't have the energy to process it, and this is such a take care of this right now, because there's no more room for the body just full. It has no energy to do anything other than barely sustain itself at that point.
Interesting. Okay. All right. That's I'm asking these questions based on personal experience, right?
No worries.
It's really just directly sort of related to what you're sharing with us. A few years back, about 5 years ago, someone told me to try this ELISA 96 food sensitivity blood test. If you haven't heard of it, then we can just skip over the question. But are you familiar with any food sensitivity testing, and what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, well, there's more tests. There's all kinds of allergy testing technique. There's all kinds of blood tests that are going on here. You have to understand that blood tests, when you have symptoms in the actual standardized blood testing, it's been in the body for a while. And when you start going off the normal ranges, the body can no longer maintain itself. So it's moving toward a disease entity. So the urine is basically a it's a much earlier mechanism. The body still has the ability to adapt, and there's no pathology manifesting yet. So we can make changes, but it's no longer, it hasn't gone to a disease entity. The allergy testing, it's not very accurate because there's so many other variables in play. Through the years, I've looked at various techniques, and the ones that I still use are the ones that I've gotten consistent results that I can actually verify. So therefore, I'm not really clear. I don't know. I haven't heard your specific one you just mentioned, but there's been a whole slew of blood tests that are in vogue at the time that, you know, the greatest things is toilet paper, and they will lead you to health. And I just haven't seen consistently over time that that's actually true, because the standardized blood tests, we look at that because that tells us, okay, is there a disease entity? Is the body can no longer maintain health, or, you know, there's no homeostasis going on here. And that's what the blood test is about. And then if I want to know functionally what's going on, I go for the UA, because that gives me a window at that time. And hopefully it hasn't gone into a disease entity, because when you have blood, when you have values in blood and you have pathology, that system is not as resilient. It's because it's having an illness, and it's been over time that has not been able to adapt. So no, I don't. Your test, I'm not clear about exactly if they're measuring. What were they actually measuring?
So they did, it was 96 different types of foods. So for example, and then it was like a little chart, which I could go grab it, but I don't have it in front of me. But basically I had a graph, and it said, how sensitive are you to these foods? And so for me, for example, it said eggs were very high sensitivity to eggs, and to dairy, all kinds of dairy, cow milk and goat's milk, and lentils and beans and cocoa beans. So for example, so that was those, so what the point of it was that to stay away from the foods that were high on the graph, which I had a higher sensitivity towards. That's what it was supposed to tell me. Which
is very typical to what those allergy testing is all about. They give you a whole list. And you ever notice that you have a whole bunch, everybody has a whole bunch of foods that are high allergic responding. So that it makes it difficult because, you know, people, I mean, diet is such a key issue. That is actually the crux of the whole thing, is what people eat. And if you limit a whole bunch of different foods, you're not going to win. People just can't not eat certain foods, especially if they have emotional, familial tendencies there already.
And I think that one of the things for me that was interesting about taking the test, so I cut out eggs out of my diet, and I very limited my dairy intake, and I also try to do wheat-free, gluten-free, but I don't know what I should eat. Like obviously fruits and vegetables are good choices, right? Whole foods, healthy foods. And then you start reading stuff about, you know, well, chicken isn't so great for you. Of course, red meat, you can go both ways. Some people say a little bit is okay, not too much. You know, then there's the whole, the other side of it about how they treat the animals, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
And then there's the fats, right? You want to eat good fats and not bad. So then there's the fish, right? You eat a lot of fish. And then I just read something the other day about sometimes fish, if you have gout, if you have high uric acid in your system, you shouldn't be eating fish. So it's like all these things just sort of start to go like, what am I supposed to eat? So it sounds like your technique or your way to approach this is to do an immediate test, and that gives you more information about what's happening in someone's system, and then you can guide them in a more accurate way.
Yeah, because remember, your body needs protein, carb, fat. That is essential. And in our bodies, protein drives the biochemistry. This is the challenge I get with people. The most ill clients I get are the vegans and the vegetarians, because they're already having issues with what they're eating, and they're already having symptoms. So I always tell them at the beginning, we're going to have to, if this is really important to you, we're not going to be able to work together, because in order for me to get you to the point where I'm going to get you healing, you're going to have to eat meat-based protein, because protein drives the biochemistry. And I'm a big fan of grass-fed organic food, because yes, the industrialized protein production mechanism in this country is terrible, and the food they're making those animals, you know, in pens eat food that they don't normally eat. So you definitely have to get organically fed meat, chicken, egg, whatever. So the thing is that but protein drives the biochemistry. And because tissue repair, regeneration, healing comes from protein-based mechanisms in your body. Every enzyme in your body, every chemical reaction in your body needs a catalyst, which is an enzyme. And those are protein-based structures. When you eat protein, half of your protein gets converted into your body with carbohydrate or fat, depending on your body needs. Fat and carbohydrate cannot be converted to protein. And again, protein drives the biochemistry, okay? So it's just essential that we're getting a good quality protein coming into the body on a regular basis. And then, and this is the crux of the system that what I work is that we have to repair your digestive capacity, because most people are not able to digest the food, even if it's good quality food. Because over time, the body has taken a big toll with eating the processed food-like substances that this country feeds everybody with, and it can no longer break that food down, assimilate it, distribute it, absorb it, and then eliminate it. It's just, the system's not working. When you chew and swallow, that's just the beginning of digestion. That is not digestion. And, you know, in this country, if you go to any pharmacy and you ask the pharmacist, what are the 3 most common over-the-counter meds that they sell? You know what they are? Number 1 is pain. So pain meds. Now, pain could be a digestive stress. Number 2 is laxatives. Number 3 is heartburn medication. And they'll switch back and forth. So heartburn medication and laxatives are digestive stress, okay? And that's the most commonly over-the-counter medication in this country. So tell me we're not having digestive stress.
Yeah, well,
and that's the you know, over-the-counter. I'm not talking about the prescription meds.
Right. Yeah, well, that's where I know there's a lot of talk these days about what's it called, the microbiome?
Oh, yes.
In your gut?
Yeah, the microbiome. Oh, that's where I live. I live there. Because basically we're talking about the tube from your mouth to your anus is out of the body. Okay, it's out of the body. And when you get it, when the body gets into the blood, it's in the body. So the microbiome lives in the tube from the mouth to anus. And all kinds of things are going on there that basically are symbiotic relationship. And interesting enough, you know, we're talking about viruses today. We have viruses in our microbiome. We have bacteria, we have fungi, we have parasites in the microbiome. But in symbiotic relationship, they actually help our immune system, help our produce certain vitamins. They keep our, you know, the nutrition gets carried out, waste product is cleared out. I mean, they're part of our symbiotic relationship. And the nervous system is connected to that. Our bodies are amazing mechanisms, and the microbiome is an essential part of that healing. And when you eat so much sugar, in this country, sugar is a big problem, carbohydrates, processed carbs, because you're feeding the yeast. The yeast just loves sugar. So when they proliferate, and there's more than one kind of yeast, and when they proliferate, they have all this waste products, and your body's having a hard time clearing that stuff. And believe me, you have digestive stress when you're eating all this processed carbs. Diabetes, which is an epidemic in this country, is not a sugar problem. It's a fat digesting problem. People that cannot digest fat go to sugar to get calories. And over time, they basically hurt their pancreas and become diabetic. But I have multiple diabetics that, you know, we got to help you eat your fat, because you got to digest fat, and then that'll reduce your sugar cravings, and then we can give you, you know, you improve your health. So in this country, because of that, you know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but back in the 50s, the sugar industry suppressed a paper about fat that, you know, because now back in the 50s and early 60s and 70s, we demonized fat as the big bad evil, and that's cholesterol and that's heart disease. Well, they actually suppressed this paper. It was sugar that was causing all this problem. Sugar is the main stress of heart disease and all these issues here. So, but, you know, do you ever hear NPR talk about this? No.
Right. Some of the things I read, especially about our brain. Our brains need those fats to function properly.
Oh, my goodness. The thing is that the brain is a energy hog. It claims it right away and it takes it. So our brain says, okay, we get the high quality energy, and it prefers carbohydrate. You know, and carbohydrate is what it needs. It's high octane fuel. So the brain, the eyes, reproduction system gets the priority, and then whatever's left, everybody else has to fight over. Okay, but the brain is energy hog, because look at all the things that are going on in the brain. And carbohydrate has a bad name because of the quality of carbohydrate in this country. But we need carbohydrates. We just need the whole grains. We need that, you know, fruits and vegetables, a good quality carbohydrate coming from an organic garden. Our body needs that. You know that lard is actually beneficial to the human body because it's high dense fat, and it has essentially about omega-3, omega-6, and more than that. And we've been eating lard since the beginning of time. Our ancestors would eat the fatty foods and give the lean meats to their animals. I mean, we've totally changed how we've eaten over time and thinking it's healthy. But if you just look at our overall health in this country, it's a clear sign that our eating is not healthy. The microbiome has more critters than we have cells in our body.
Wow.
There's more parasites, fungi, yeast, viruses, bacteria, number-wise, in our microbiome than we have cells in our body. So does that make us, you know, are we microorganisms or are we human? just for that. But all those cells need nutrition every day. So what you put in your mouth, chew and swallow, is how you're going to feed that system. So the question I always ask people, are you able to deliver the goods to those cells? And obviously they're not, because they're coming in and seeing me. They're having all kinds of issues as a result of that. But it's an essential part of it. What we eat, you know, there's a disconnect with how important, how we take better care of our cars. We're more picky about what kind of fuel we're going to put into our cars than the food we put into our bodies. I'm always like, what? Wait a minute. Aren't you more important than the car? You know?
Well, not only that, but I think part of the issue is just like smoking. Like you smoke a cigarette, you're not going to drop dead, right? And you smoke a few cigarettes, you're not going to drop. It takes years for that to happen. So we go, oh, fine. Look, I smoked a cigarette. I'm still here. So I'm going to smoke another one. And the same thing with food. We eat, and our bodies just are able to function still, right, for a long time before we start to fall apart. Typically, I mean, not always. Sometimes it does happen earlier on. There are more immediate things that happen, like you said, with their indigestion and heartburn and other things that are more immediate. But in general, we can keep moving and functioning and doing our lives for quite a long time before we start to feel the effects of eating badly. So it's kind of like we're a boiling frog, you know, the boiling frog story. Right?
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, that's true. That makes it challenging. Yes.
And then one day, you know, sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later, and then we get sick, and we go, oh, fix me, just like you said earlier. And it's been a cumulative effect, and we can reverse it, though. That's the good news.
Yeah, and thankfully, you know, depending on what age you are and how much recuperative ability you have left, the body can regenerate. It's an amazing system.
Do you have any, like, one of your favorite success stories of someone that came in and was kind of falling apart or whatever, and then you worked with them and changed their diet, and they just, you know, took responsibility and were able to turn it around?
Well, you know, it jumps in my mind. I just saw a client last week who she's been through 3 gastroenterologists, and they diagnosed her with irritable bowel syndrome, which is a very generalized, what I call a garbage diagnosis. It doesn't really tell you anything other than you have inflammation in your gut. So I went through the protocol, examined, 24-hour UA, examined her and challenged her digestive capacity. And her stomach was unable to had very little mucous membrane, healthy mucus, and therefore anything was irritating that stomach. And so we just basically, there's the formulation that helps restore the mucous membrane of the stomach so they can begin digestion, because your protein digestion is occurring in the stomach mostly. Carbohydrate goes into the small intestine, and fat is in the stomach, but it moves down into the duodenum. But anyway, just in the first week, she felt better than she's gone through a 3-year journey with 3 gastroenterologists, and she just couldn't believe that it was that quickly that can happen. And I always explain to people, you know, your body can heal. It just needs the proper nutrition, you know. And the thing with her is basically getting her to the diet was an issue. So we had to guide her with certain foods. She needs to just basically cut the insult. You know, we have to cut that down. Coffee being a big stress because she was drinking too much coffee. So instead of going from 4 cups, you're going down to 2 cups. And then from 2 cups, we'll go down to 1 cup and then see how that works. So just in that short period of time, she thinks I'm walking on water, and it wasn't me. We just gave her some information that she just hadn't been access to, but her body wanted to heal. So that's just jumped out when I said that. And also, Laura, I want to talk about, as I'm a chiropractor and I still adjust. And the adjustment has a great effect on healing because there's a lot of research being done in New Zealand now. We actually have a chiropractor who became a physicist, neurophysicist. She's doing research, and she ties all these neurological, she's doing a lot of research. What does the adjustment actually do? And one of the thing that she's been doing this for 10 years now is that the adjustment has a neurological effect on the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is right here, which is the executor of the brain. And it resets that mechanism so that brain is more aware. It's getting present time information from the rest of the body. So all the 10 organ systems is getting direct information, accurate information, so they can make adjustments. So the adjustment has a great effect on maintaining that particular body, so it actually has present time information. In a crude analogy, it's like rebooting the computer, so the software does doing what the hardware's doing, even though we're much more complex than computer systems, but people can understand that. So the adjustment plays a big role. I want to stress that because I'm a chiropractor, and when I adjust people and I improve their diet and have their ability to digest, the body has an amazing response.
Yeah, I was going to just ask you about that. So we're both ready to transition over into that part of the conversation.
Yeah, because remember I said before, the two main stressors are structural, meaning how do we deal with gravity? That's the structural issue. And then the other one is what are they putting in on the body on a regular basis?
Like what's going on when someone's walking around and then they get the adjustment, what's off? Like, is it just can you explain more about what happens?
Well, it's a complex system, neurologically and mechanically. There's all, the systems are all connected, but the nervous system controls everything. And so just you have what they call sensory neurons for motor, meaning that your body's constantly monitoring the system, how everything's functioning. And there's a constant communication back and forth of all the 10 body systems, the cardiovascular system, the skin, the kidneys, the liver, reproduction. It's all being orchestrated by the brain, the hypothalamus. It maintains awareness and control basically by hormones or mechanical movement or changing some neurotransmitters. It's an amazing, amazing system. And we don't know everything about it now, but we have a lot of information. So one of the things that happens is that after time is that that communication gets a little bit hindered by that body system, whatever's going on with that nutritional component or that physical activity. So the brain is not getting accurate information, and it's adapting to what it knows. And so when you reset that information and get accurate information, it can adapt and make some compromises and maybe change the biochemistry of that particular organ system or that joint, and the body just can be more healthy state. So that's what you're doing as the adjusting. As a chiropractor, let me give you how I even got into nutrition, because in school you learn basic nutrition, protein, carb, and fat. So when I first got out of school, I would get people to take standard processing vitamins, and I would make sure that people, whether you're a woman or a man, what hormone systems I was nourishing. But I could never tell if it had any effect. I would ask them, well, how do you feel? And they would say, I don't know. I feel, I don't know. They would be like, there'd be no change at all. And you're taking, high concentration foods. So it was frustrating because I go like, oh, I don't know how to do this, but I would adjust somebody. Back when I was first out in school, I would see people 3 times a week for the first 2 weeks and then start cutting it back after that. But when I would see the same pattern 3 times a week, and I adjusted it Monday, Wednesday, come back, the same pattern on Wednesday, come back on Friday, same pattern on Friday. Following Monday, I could see the same. I go, wait a minute, I adjusted this area. Why is this still the same? Something's off here. And it was frustrating because I could not understand, because I knew what I was doing was having an effect, but why wasn't it holding? Well, what holds the system? What are ligaments, muscles, and joints? They're a protein, carbon, fat derivative, and they're dependent on proper nutrition. And one day we get in chiropractic at that time, we get 2, what we call chiropractic propaganda coming in, newspapers back then. And we used to get newspapers in our office. They were selling stuff. So you get them. And I just put it into the recycle bin. I just threw it into the recycle bin and opened up to this article about Dr. Howard Loomis, which is my mentor, about nutrition. And the title of the article, do you really want to know what the adjustment does not get the results that you want? So I go, oh, okay, I'll read that article. And so he had just written a book about enzymes in health. And so I read the article. I go, well, I need to read the article. And I called them up and I said, okay, I want to, when's your book come out? Well, the book had not come out yet. He goes, well, when are you coming out to California to give a seminar? He goes, I don't come to California. I go, everybody comes to California. He goes, well, I don't. So then I said, okay, fine. So I'll get the book when it came out. The book came out. I read the book. I booked the flight to Wisconsin because he got me to the point where he's a chiropractor. And he says, this is how we, the missing link of how the adjustments will hold. So adjusting somebody 3 times a week is the Band-Aid because that body is not getting proper nutrition to hold the adjustments.
Wow.
And that's what started me on the journey because that's what changed how my perspective. I don't want to be a Band-Aid. I want to help people get healthy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I know some chiropractors, you have to keep going back forever and ever and ever. Because of that, because it doesn't hold, but it sounds like with the nutrition component. So you've got the chiropractic part, you've got the nutrition part, and it sounds like those two things are being effective for most of your clients. That's awesome.
Yeah, because you're dealing with organic stuff. I mean, I actually enjoy the nutritional component because I'm going to adjust, and there's been some people that don't want to get adjusted, and they're far and few between. You respect that. But when you adjust and you get people to respond, I see, my walk clients every 3 weeks. So that's the time. I haven't found anybody that comes in 3 week cycle and doesn't need adjustments. They all do. Now, if your kids are different, I've had kids come back and they'll need an adjustment because they still haven't got damaged enough. But adults, it's hard being on this planet.
It sure is. Any help we can get is awesome. So, all right. Well, is there anything else that you want to share?
What I like to do is I like to really stress, especially now with this COVID-19 has really pushed that same button again, is I want to stress how resilient we are. We've been around lots of years. This virus is not stronger than us. It's just a virus. And our bodies have the capacity to deal with it, to be strong. We talk about our immune system. You notice that the country is referring to this like this magic vaccine is going to come out and save us. But in reality, it's our ability to fight infection. We've been here since, depending which book you read, 3,000 years, 10,000 years, 6,000, I don't know, depending which book you read. We've been here a long time. And there's been lots of viruses. And like I said before, when you look at the microbiome, we have viruses inside of our bodies. We have viruses in our skin. So it's not them, it's our immune function and how healthy we are, which goes back to what are we eating on a regular basis of our emotional being. We haven't talked about the emotion component here because that's a very powerful force. The term of stress, I don't know if you ever heard of Hans Selye, but he wrote a book back in the 60s called the General Adaptation Syndrome. He basically mentioned that the body responds to stress in an identical way, no matter what the stress is, whether it's chemical, nutritional, or emotionally. The body goes through a general adaptation syndrome. And the first thing it does, it inflames. Inflammation is actually a natural response to stress. The challenge is, does it get stuck there chronically, or does it just go through the process of healing, tissue repair, regeneration? So it's just a matter of how do we support ourselves to be healthy? And that's the thing we have to understand. We're resilient in the basic laws of human health, and we just follow them. We are strong, resilient beings. So don't believe the media. They make us sound so freaking fragile. No, we're much, much, much stronger than they would have. And it's within our capacity to do that. We have the ability to make some lifestyle changes because health is about what are you doing on a regular basis? And if you don't know, there's a lot of information. There's people out there that can help you become more aware if you have questions. But we're strong. My point being is that I want to finish up. We're very strong creations that can endure and survive and thrive.
If we take care of this body, this machine that we're walking around on the earth, we have to give it what it needs in order to
exactly. And we have to become conscious. We have to become conscious because that's the thing about this country. I don't know what it is about our culture, but it seems to perpetuate unconscious behavior. That people just do stuff without even thinking what they're doing. And to be healing, to be healthy, you have to become aware. In order to do that, it requires consciousness. Okay, right. I'm going to eat this because, okay, I know that's going to cause stress, but I'm going to enjoy it anyway. Or I'm not going to eat that. Or I'm going to exercise regularly. Or I'm going to hang out with good friends. I'm going to stop seeing that person just likes to complain all the time. And those are conscious choices, but we have to become aware of that, because what gives our body that environment, that nutrition, that emotional space that where I'm actually feeling healthy, feeling happy, feeling joyful. Yeah. And that's a choice. You know, I want to stress that it's a choice.
Yes.
And don't get, because people get so upset when I bring that up, and I go like, no, I want to encourage you. You know, where are you? Let's take you where you are, and we can go from there. Because right. There's so much anxiety and fear. You know, it's just, unfortunately, this whole thing with the virus thing is the fear phenomena has just gone off the charts.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Thank you so much for being on the show at Portillo, Portillo, chiropractic.com.
Correct.